The morning sun had barely climbed over the hills when Merrick Debrescu stood at the edge of his cracked, dust-choked field, watching his last handful of wheat seeds slip through his fingers like grains of hope he could no longer afford to waste. He didn't know that in exactly 1 year, the same man who was about to humiliate him in front of the entire village would be kneeling in that very field, begging for a mercy he never once offered. The village of Bratovo was small, the kind of place where everyone's business belonged to everyone else, and where Anton Vasilev's name was spoken with a mixture of fear and envy. Anton owned the granary, the mill, and half the farmland that other men worked just to survive. He wore tailored coats even in the heat of harvest season, and his laughter echoed through the market square whenever he found something to mock. That particular morning, he found Merrick. Merrick had walked 3 miles into town, his boots worn through at the soles, to ask Anton for a small loan of seed and grain until his next harvest came in. His wife, Ilinka, was expecting their 3rd child, and their store of food had dwindled to almost nothing. Merrick was not a proud man, but it cost him everything to stand in that granary doorway with his hat in his hands. Anton looked him up and down, taking in the patched clothes, the calloused hands, the desperation barely hidden behind tired eyes, and he laughed. He laughed loud enough that the merchants nearby turned to watch. "A man who cannot feed his own family," Anton said, "wants me to hand him my grain. Go home, farmer. The soil that grows nothing but weeds cannot be helped by charity." The crowd chuckled uneasily, and Merrick, his face burning with shame, turned and walked the 3 miles home in silence. If you believe kindness matters, and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom so you never miss a story like this one. That winter was the hardest Bratovo had seen in a decade. Marek's family survived on boiled roots and the goodwill of a few neighbors who had little to spare themselves. Ilinka gave birth to a daughter they named Sofia, born small and fragile in a house with a leaking roof and a cold hearth. Merrick worked before dawn and after dusk, turning the stubborn earth with hands that bled through his gloves, refusing to let his family starve, refusing to let Anton's laughter be the last word. Slowly, painfully, the following spring brought rain, and Marek's fields, the ones everyone had written off, began to green with a stubborn, defiant life. Anton, meanwhile, believed his fortune was untouchable. He expanded his holdings, bought more land, and grew more careless with the people beneath him. But wealth built on the suffering of others has a way of crumbling exactly when a man least expects it. A fire swept through Anton's largest grain store that summer, started by a lantern left burning too close to dry straw. Weeks later, a fever spread through his cattle, and half his herd was lost before anyone could stop it. His creditors, once so eager to smile in his presence, began calling in debts he could no longer pay. Within a year, the man who once owned half the village found himself standing outside his own granary, now boarded shut, with nothing but the tailored coat on his back and a hollow, gnawing fear he had never known before. Word spread of one farmer whose fields had somehow flourished against every odd, a man known now not for his poverty but for his quiet resilience and his generosity toward neighbors even poorer than himself. Anton heard Marek's name spoken with the same respect once reserved for himself, and something in his chest twisted with a shame he didn't have words for. He avoided the road that led past Marek's farm for as long as he could, but hunger, real hunger, the kind that hollows a man's pride along with his stomach, eventually forced his hand. He walked those same 3 miles, his once fine boots now cracked and dusty, until he stood at the edge of the field where he had once told a desperate man to go home. Merrick was there, sleeves rolled up, guiding his daughter Sophia's small hands as she learned to plant seeds in the soft spring soil. He looked up and saw Anton standing at the fence, thinner now, his shoulders bowed, his eyes carrying the same desperation Merrick remembered feeling that day in the granary doorway. Anton opened his mouth to speak, and found he couldn't. There was no laughter left in him, only the raw, trembling weight of asking for help from the very man he had once ridiculed. He managed only a few broken words, an apology tangled with a request he was ashamed to make. Merrick set down his tools and walked to the fence. He remembered every second of that humiliating morning, the laughter, the crowd, the long walk home in silence. He could have turned away. No one in the village would have blamed him. But he looked at Anton, really looked at him, and saw not the powerful man who had mocked him, but simply another human being who had fallen as low as Merrick himself had once been. Without a word, Merrick opened the gate and told Anton there was always room at his table for a hungry man, and always seed enough to share with someone willing to work the earth beside him. Anton's legs nearly gave out beneath him, and for the first time in years, tears he could not explain slipped down his face. From that day forward, Anton worked Marek's fields not as a master but as a humbled equal, learning what it truly meant to earn one's bread through honest labor and to receive kindness he had never deserved but was never once made to beg for twice. The village watched the transformation with quiet wonder, and in time, the story of the rich man who laughed and the farmer who forgave became the kind of tale told to children at bedtime, a reminder that pride can fall in a single season, but kindness, real kindness, can rebuild what arrogance destroys. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it today, and leave a comment telling me what part moved you most. And before we go, I want to ask something special from you. Type kindness in the comments below if you believe, like Merrick did, that everyone deserves a chance to change, no matter how far they've fallen. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.